So I've been asked if I can say something about the writer and when this book was written and what it's about. So it was written by a man called Alan Garner, still extant, I believe, still alive. He was born in 1934, 2 years after my mum, actually. And he, therefore, I think, was 26, very young when he wrote it. And he was born in Cheshire, near a place called Alderley Edge, and he got very interested in all the fairy stories and the folklore around that area. And when I looked him up, I thought, oh, what an interesting, there were lots of things I didn't know about him, which was things like his family were all working class rural family, were connected to that place way back from the 1500s, you know, when Henry VIII was getting fat and murdering his wives. And I always loved the King Arthur story, so I love the idea of a company of knights lying sleeping under a hill. The thing about Alan Garner was that he was very ill when he was little. He suffered quite a lot of life-threatening diseases, which I know sounds horrid, but actually probably did a lot to shape him as a writer. He probably had to deal with a lot, and he probably escaped into his imagination, and he loved his surroundings. So he wrote about the nature that he'd grown up in that he couldn't go out into because he was so ill. And also another thing that was interesting about him was that when he was at school, they didn't allow him, they punished him, in fact, for speaking in his Cheshire dialect. Now, I'm not sure how this dialect goes. I'm going to try and read some out later this month, but it's sort of, I don't know what it's like. I'm guessing. In fact, someone from Cheshire is probably going to come and hit me very hard with a cricket bat for getting it wrong. But anyway, he was punished at school for speaking with that accent, and that sort of thing doesn't happen anymore. But again, I think that would have made him even more passionate to tell the stories of where he grew up and in the voices that he heard all around him when he was growing up. In fact, in school, once his teacher actually washed his mouth out with soap and water for speaking in that dialect. I know, it's extraordinary, isn't it, what they used to do? But then they used to send children up chimneys, so we've come a long way. He was a very good sprinter and runner, and he was very, very clever. And some of his family couldn't cope with that. I don't know whether any of you've experienced that. Sometimes very clever children are kind of slightly rejected because they seem a bit otherworldly and people get frightened of them. So that's about him. So I think you'll agree he's rather an interesting writer. And he wrote it in 1960, a year after I was born. And he wrote it in the country. And it was only 15 years after the end of that great big Second World War. So there were still ration books and not quite enough to eat. And it was quite hard. So stories were all the more necessary and all the more needed, especially where I came from, London town, which was very dark and sooty and still very dirty from all the soot from the chimneys with all the coal that they used to burn. Yes, I'm so old. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. It's about two young people called Susan and Colin, who are brother and sister, and a great adventure that they go on, a great protection that they have to undertake for the whole of our country, of this island. So they were responsible for an awful lot. Anyway, that's it. I've gone on for long enough. Lots of love. I'll speak to you in a week.